6 months ago. My own son sold my house while I was in the hospital. I lost everything I'd worked 40 years to build. But what he doesn't know is, I've been playing chess while he's been playing checkers. The day he came crawling back, begging me to change my will back, was the sweetest revenge I've ever tasted. Have you ever been betrayed by the person you loved most? The person you bled for, starved for, sacrificed every breath and dollar for? Let me tell you what happens when a mother's patience finally runs out. You see, I didn't come from wealth. I came from grit. I scrubbed toilets at 3 a.m. and made dinners from scraps. I stitched socks by candlelight while my children slept under patched blankets. I gave my son everything. My savings. My trust. My name. He gave me nothing back but silence and signatures. I built that house with calloused hands and a loyal heart. And in one slick move, my son stole it from me while I lay hooked to machines, clutching at breath. But this isn't a sob story. This is a story about silence, about what happens when someone underestimates the woman who raised them. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is the most devastating, and the people who think they've already won have no idea what's coming for them. But first, let me take you back to where it all started. The day I realized my own child had become a stranger. My name is Margaret Thompson, but most folks around the neighborhood just called me Maggie. I was the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, brought soup to the sick, and never turned down a knock on the door. For 35 years, that house on Sycamore Street was my entire world. Robert and I bought it when we were just starting out, fresh-faced and full of hope. It wasn't much at first, a fixer-upper with drafty windows and creaky floors, but we filled it with laughter, Sunday dinners, and the kind of love that doesn't flinch in a storm. Then came the heart attack. It took Robert in the middle of a cold January morning, just a few weeks before his retirement. He died clutching my hand. I buried him in the same suit he wore to church every week. And from that moment on, I stopped being a wife and became something else entirely. A quiet soldier for my children. 3 kids. I raised them with the discipline of a teacher and the heart of a mother who didn't have the luxury of quitting. David was always the driven one. Sarah moved to Oregon for her nursing job, and Michael built a life in New York, working in finance. But David stayed closer to home, chasing real estate deals and eventually getting tangled in a messy divorce that drained him of everything but pride. When I had my minor stroke 2 years ago, David was the one who stepped up. He insisted I sign over power of attorney. Said it was just to make sure my bills were paid on time. I trusted him. He was my son, the one I always favored, if I'm being honest. I gave him the down payment for his first property. I watched him build a company from scratch. I told my friends, David's the one who truly cares. And for a while it looked like I was right. He visited often, brought me groceries, paid the utility bills, called every evening to check on me. He even helped install handrails in the shower. I remember thinking, at least I got one who still shows up. I was already rewriting my will in my mind. Sarah and Michael were busy. But David was here. He'd get the house. It felt fair, but love can make you blind. I should have noticed how often he brought up the value of the property. You know, Mom, this neighborhood's really gone up in price, he'd say, tapping at Zillow like it was gospel. Or how he'd stiffen when Sarah called, his voice clipped, impatient. He started telling me not to bother my friends with little things. Said I was better off resting. Said he'd take care of everything. And I believed him. I didn't think twice when Mrs. Chen, my next-door neighbor, said she saw contractors measuring my front porch. I brushed it off. Maybe they're fixing something next door. I told her. She nodded, but the look in her eyes lingered. She's the type who notices things, always watching out her kitchen window, always offering a warm plate if you're hungry, and a hard truth if you need it. Then there was Eleanor, my old friend from my teaching days. She's retired now. Used to be a lawyer. She'd stop by once a week with pastries and stories. Recently. She asked an odd question over tea. "Has David mentioned your will lately?" I laughed and said, "Only that he wants me to live forever." But even as I said it, I remembered he had been asking questions, detailed ones. Still, I smiled, because in my heart, I believed I was blessed. I thought I was blessed to have such a caring son. I had no idea that while I was counting my blessings, he was counting my assets. The chest pains came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sharp, sudden, and unfamiliar. Not enough to scream, but enough to scare me. By the time the ambulance doors closed, I was trembling, alone, frightened, and thinking only one thing. Whiskers. Don't forget to feed Whiskers. David met me at the hospital with flowers and a furrowed brow. He kissed my forehead and told the nurses, "I'll handle everything at home." His voice was calm, practiced, like he'd done this before. For 6 days, I stayed in a sterile room with soft beeping monitors and a window that overlooked nothing but a brick wall. I worried about my garden, the tulips just beginning to open. I worried about the leak in the back porch roof I meant to patch. I worried about Whiskers. I worried about being a burden. David came each day with fresh roses and sweet reassurances. "Don't worry. Mom, rest. I've got it all handled." He looked so put together, so in control. I felt grateful. But something shifted on the day of my discharge. He was quieter. No flowers. Just keys in his hand and his jaw clenched tight. "Let's get you home," he said. But he didn't take the usual route. He drove a little faster. A little too calmly. As we turned the corner onto Sycamore Street, I saw it. A red and white sold sign stabbed into the front lawn. I blinked. My voice cracked. "David, why is there a sign on Mrs. Peterson's house?" He didn't look at me. "That's not Mrs. Peterson's house." "Mom," he said, "that's yours." Time didn't stop, but something inside me did. He didn't park. He didn't explain. He just kept driving. I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "I sold the house," he said flatly. "While you were in the hospital, I used the power of attorney. You're moving into a better place. An assisted living apartment. More manageable. You'll thank me." I couldn't breathe. It wasn't a heart attack this time. It was something worse. Heartbreak has its own weight. It sits heavy in your ribs. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The world tilted, sharp and unreal. I turned to look at him, but all I could say was, "How could you?" He shrugged. "It's better this way. That house was too much for you. It's not safe." He said it like a man defending a business transaction. "I already used part of the money for the company. You know how tough the market's been. I'll pay you back." "It's temporary." He paused. "You're being dramatic. It's just a house." "No, it was never just a house. It was my marriage. My children's first steps. My husband's ghost in the hallway. It was 40 years of me, layered in every wall, every photo frame, every creaky stair. But David didn't hear that. Instead, he pulled up to a cold beige building with sliding glass doors and a fake fountain out front. The kind of place that smelled like bleach and overcooked peas. Inside, a small apartment waited for me. 2 suitcases, a too-narrow bed, a laminated welcome brochure on the table, my favorite chair jammed awkwardly in the corner, a dresser that wasn't mine. Whiskers? Not allowed. No pets policy. David smiled like this was kindness. He hugged me loosely, like a man closing a deal. "I'll check in soon," he said, walking away before I could answer. And just like that, I was no longer a homeowner. I was a problem placed into a system and checked off a list. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at white walls that held no stories, no family photos, no smells of dinner or old books or memories, just silence and the hollow tick of a battery-powered clock. I tried to sleep, but the quiet was too loud. No creak of the front steps, no wind brushing the porch swing, no soft thud of whiskers landing on my blanket. Just this ringing emptiness where a life used to be. Have you ever felt that moment when someone you love becomes a complete stranger? When everything you believed about them just shatters? Because I did, right there in that too bright room. And as the sun started rising through the blinds, I lay there that first night, thinking my life was over. I had no idea it was actually about to begin. I barely moved that first week. I sat by the window like a ghost, watching nothing, feeling even less. The meals came and went, untouched. The staff at the facility were kind, but their kindness only made the grief louder. I wasn't ready for their sympathy. I wasn't ready for anything. A few residents tried to make conversation, offering stories about bridge clubs and grandchildren, but I couldn't respond. My words were trapped under the weight of betrayal. David called once, just once. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? Settling in?" No apology, no regret, just a clinical check-in. Like I was a bill he needed to mark as paid. Then I found out about Whiskers. He didn't even bother to find her a home. Just dumped her at a local shelter like a forgotten donation. I cried harder than I did in the hospital. But then something shifted. It happened the morning Mrs. Chen showed up, wearing a floral scarf and that familiar look. The one that always came right before she dropped a truth too heavy for small talk. She sat beside me, held my hand, and said, "He's renovating the house." I blinked. "What?" "Your boy," she said. "He told the neighbors you wanted to downsize, that it was all your idea. And now? Contractors in and out every day? He's planning to flip it. Says it'll fetch at least $650,000 once the new kitchen's in." My stomach churned. "He lied." She nodded. "That boy is not who you raised him to be." And for the first time in days, I didn't cry. I boiled. 2 days later, Eleanor came. I hadn't called her. Mrs. Chen did. Eleanor's eyes widened as I told her everything. And then, the lawyer in her rose like a tide. "Maggie," she said slowly, "power of attorney doesn't mean he owns your assets. It doesn't mean he can sell your home without limits, especially not without your consent." It was the first spark I'd felt in a week, a small glimmer of maybe. We started requesting documents, the title transfer, the closing paperwork, bank activity, and then the crack showed. David had forged my signature on at least 3 documents. Worse, his power of attorney, granted during my stroke recovery, was limited. It specifically excluded real estate transactions. He'd crossed a line. Eleanor leaned back, hands steepled. And if we can get video confirmation. 2 days later, the security footage from the bank came in. There he was, David, signing papers with a pen clenched in his left hand, wearing my old coat, hunched slightly like me, signing as Margaret Thompson. That wasn't incompetence. That was premeditation. Something in me stirred. The next day, I called the real estate agent listed on the sale. She was hesitant at first, but once I explained who I was, she softened, and what she told me made my skin crawl. David had priced the house low, way below market, and closed the deal within 48 hours. The buyer? His business partner. No inspections, no open house, just a handshake behind closed doors. Fraud. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a teacher. I knew how to read between lines. I knew how to dig. And more than anything, I knew how to keep going when others quit. It started small. I asked the facility director to reconsider the pet policy. I showed them photos of Whiskers and me. I explained the emotional bond, the loneliness, the damage that had been done. They bent the rule. Whiskers came back. At first, just for short visits. But that soft purr in my lap, it was enough. Then came the other residents. A few heard my story. One woman told me how her niece emptied her bank account. Another said her son forged her name for a car loan. We weren't just roommates. We were survivors. I began helping them, reviewing their paperwork, explaining terms, even drafting letters. I found myself remembering who I was, a teacher, an advocate, a fighter, and slowly, a plan began to form. Fighting the sale directly would take years. Court cases, expenses, stress. But what if I didn't have to take back the house? What if I took something else? David was greedy, but not stupid. He was counting on my silence, counting on the fact that the will still listed him as the sole heir. He didn't just steal the house. He was gambling on the rest. My retirement savings, my life insurance, every cent I had left, $340,000 worth. And legally, he still stood to get it all, because I hadn't changed my will. Yet, have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had? Sometimes our worst moments reveal our greatest power. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If David wanted to play games with my money, I'd show him how a retired teacher wins at chess. You could sue him, Eleanor said, leaning over my kitchen table, the one with more legal folders than coffee mugs these days. But it'll take years, maybe longer. I stared at the manila folder in front of me, full of documents with my name, but not my handwriting. And criminal charges? She sighed. Forgery, elder financial abuse. Yes, it's possible. But prosecutors move slowly, and with the burden of proof, she trailed off, then looked me in the eye. But Maggie, you have something more powerful than the law. What's that? She smiled. You have his expectations. That's when I knew. I didn't have to chase justice in court. I could trap it in plain sight. Because David wasn't just greedy. He was dependent. Every move he made was built on the assumption that I would do nothing, that I would stay silent, that I'd die soon enough, and he'd inherit everything I hadn't already given him. His business was failing. His reputation was shaky. And his alimony payments were bleeding him dry. He needed me. Or rather, he needed what I had left. That was his mistake. We started with surveillance. Mrs. Chen became my eyes in the old neighborhood. She called every few days with updates. New tile deliveries, landscaping trucks, glossy pamphlets about the renovated modern dream home hitting the market soon. Meanwhile, Eleanor helped me hire a private investigator. 3 weeks in, we had a snapshot of his financial reality. David was drowning. $400,000 in business debt. 2 missed payments to his ex-wife. His contractor was threatening to sue over unpaid invoices. His office lease was about to expire. He wasn't flipping that house for the market. He was flipping it to survive. And he thought my will would save him. That's when I contacted James Morrison, Eleanor's colleague, an estate attorney who understood the power of a well-placed trap. We rewrote everything. The new will included a fortress of contingencies. David wouldn't get a penny, not even if he contested. We built a trust, irrevocable, shielded, legally sound. Every dime I had would go to the local animal shelter in Whisker's honor, and to a literacy foundation that helped adults learn to read. My name would live on, not as a footnote in my son's bankruptcy plan, but as a legacy of quiet resistance. But we didn't stop there. We started documenting everything, every phone call with David, recorded. It was legal in our state. Every text message, saved, screenshotted, cataloged. Eleanor brought in a handwriting expert to verify the forged signatures. The evidence piled up, heavy and undeniable. Then came the performance. I started acting, small. I let my hands shake when David visited. I asked him to repeat simple things, pretended I was forgetful. I let my eyes look glassy, tired, vulnerable. I've been thinking about changing my will, I'd say, voice soft. He'd smile, too wide. I just don't want it going to some shelter, you know. He leaned forward. Of course not. Mom, You don't need to worry. I'll take care of everything." And just like that, the hook sank deeper. He began visiting more often, bringing flowers again, offering to fix things around the facility, talking about our future plans as if we shared a single brain. I played the role. The grateful, aging mother, the woman too tired to know better. Inside, I was counting down the days. The private investigator followed the money trail. We discovered he'd told potential investors the inheritance was secured. He used my name in conversations with lenders. He sold the old family house to his business partner at a discount, only to have that partner flip it again, this time with David's name conveniently missing from the profits. Desperation makes people sloppy. The staff at the facility noticed, too. One nurse told me he was rude when no one was looking. Another heard him brag on the phone about old money coming through. They offered to give written statements if needed. Even Whiskers seemed tense around him. She'd hide in the corner when he arrived, tail stiff, eyes wary. Animals always know. But I waited. I rehearsed my responses in the mirror. How I'd look at him, what I'd say when the time came. I practiced breathing slowly, even when every cell in my body wanted to scream. I imagined the moment he would crumble, and I knew exactly when it had to happen. He needed one more thing, my signature, something official, something he could show the bank. I let the conversation happen organically. "Mom," he said one afternoon, casually flipping through my mail like it belonged to him. "Have you thought about that lawyer yet? The one you mentioned?" "Yes," I whispered, feigning uncertainty. "I scheduled a meeting, just to make everything official." He lit up. "I should come with you. Help explain things." I nodded slowly. "That would be helpful. Have you ever had to play a long game against someone who hurt you? Sometimes patience is the most powerful weapon we have." 3 months into my plan, David made the mistake I was waiting for. He got desperate, and desperate people make sloppy choices. Greed has a scent. You can smell it when it starts to rot. David's calls turned more frequent, more urgent. His business partner pulled out of the renovation deal, claiming too many loose ends. His ex-wife's lawyer was threatening to garnish what little he had left. And with each visit to my facility, David looked a little more frayed, like a man holding together a mask that no longer fit. But he still smiled, still brought flowers, still called me Mom in that sickly sweet tone, fishing for reassurances. I gave him just enough. Then I made my first move. I staged a little episode during one of his visits, clutched my chest, closed my eyes, breathed shallow. Nothing serious, just enough to make him lean forward. "I've been thinking," I whispered when he helped me into the chair. "What'll happen to my money when I'm gone?" He perked up like a hound on a scent. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, already smoothing my arm. "I'll handle everything, like always." I nodded slowly. "I just don't want it going to strangers." He smiled. "It won't." He thought he was winning, so I let him. A week later, I told him I'd had a consultation with a new estate lawyer. He said I should just transfer everything into your name now. I murmured. David's eyes lit up like Vegas. "That's smart," he said. "Makes things easier. I can take care of everything, now and later." "I'm just not sure," I said. "Maybe I'll wait a few weeks to decide." He didn't hide the flash of irritation. "There's no reason to wait, Mom." But I did. Meanwhile, I sprung my next trap. I recorded our next conversation, legally. I asked about the house. Soft voice, curious tone. He said it like it was nothing. You would have said yes anyway. "Mom, it's not like I did anything you wouldn't have done." There it was, a confession, wrapped in arrogance. He thought he was immune, above consequences. That only made him easier to catch. He started calling twice a day. Then 3 times. Flowers became chocolates. Chocolates became silk scarves. Scarves became new slippers, bathrobes, and even a new phone. One he could set up for me. He began talking about our future again. "You'll be comfortable. You'll never have to worry about anything," he'd say. "And the business, once I'm back on track, well, I'll make you proud." But each conversation revealed just how desperate he truly was. He was already spending the inheritance. The investigator confirmed it. David had used my credit line to float one of his last deals. There were bank transfers that didn't belong, business accounts where my name showed up in memos. And old colleagues of his confirmed he told them the house money came from his early inheritance. Eleanor's file grew heavier with every page. Even the nurses started noticing. He's different. One whispered to me, pushy, demanding, talks down to the aides like he owns the place. Another said he asked how much my care was costing. Twice. But I kept my act polished. Every time he visited, I looked fragile. I asked him the same questions twice, sometimes 3 times. David, what's a trust again? David, do I have to pay taxes on my own savings? He never questioned it, just fed the illusion I was too old, too soft, too dependent. All while I documented everything, and when the moment came to set the final piece, I didn't flinch. I made the appointment. I told him over tea, with the lawyer. I want to make everything official. For you. You deserve that security. He nearly cried from relief. Do you want me to come with you? He asked. I'd like that. He didn't see the storm building. Too busy preparing his own sunshine. He began telling people again that the money was finally coming, that the foundation was done, and the rest would be poured soon, that the check he'd been waiting for was as good as in his hands. He promised his ex-wife he'd catch up on missed payments. Big changes are coming. Jen, don't worry. He told new business partners the same. And all the while, I watched. Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave with their greed? Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people enough rope. The day of the lawyer meeting arrived. David picked me up early. Humming, whistling, grinning like a man walking into a vault. He even opened the car door for me. Something he hadn't done in 20 years. On the way there, he talked about vacations, a new office, maybe even a second chance with his kids. And I sat there, nodding gently, smiling softly, because what he didn't know, he wasn't driving me to a meeting. He was driving straight into his reckoning. The office was colder than I remembered. Dark wood panels, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished brass lamps. Everything inside screamed control, tradition, consequence. David walked in ahead of me, wearing his best suit and a cologne I hadn't smelled since his wedding day. His tie was too tight, his smile too wide. He held the door like a man escorting an elderly relative, gentle but impatient. Don't be nervous, he whispered. Hand on my back. This is just a formality. I nodded and let him lead me into the conference room. Attorney James Morrison stood when we entered. Behind him, a paralegal sat with a thick folder. I took a seat slowly, hands trembling just enough to fit the performance. David didn't sit. He stood beside me like a handler, one hand on my chair, the other in his pocket. He introduced himself before I had the chance. I'm David Thompson, he said with authority. Margaret's son. I've been managing her affairs. We're here to finalize the transfer and secure everything. Morrison tilted his head. Mr. Thompson, before we proceed, there are a few irregularities we need to discuss. David's brow furrowed. What do you mean? His voice faltered. Not much, but just enough for me to hear the first crack. Morrison gestured to the paralegal, who opened the folder. First, he said calmly, we have security footage from Riverbank Financial. It shows a man signing loan authorization documents under the name Margaret Thompson. The individual in the footage is not Mrs. Thompson. I glanced sideways, watching David's knuckles tighten around the chair back. Second, Morrison continued, we have voice recordings, clear admissions of unauthorized real estate activity. Third, we have bank records showing misappropriation of funds from joint accounts. The silence turned acidic. David laughed, dry, hollow. Okay, hold on. I was helping her. She's not always clear. I had power of attorney. That gives me legal access. Morrison didn't flinch. Your power of attorney, Mr. Thompson, specifically excluded real estate transactions. and did not include the right to open new credit lines under her name. David shifted, his jaw flexed. Then he turned to me. "Mom, tell them I was trying to help." I stayed silent. Then Morrison flipped the final page in the folder. "And just so we're transparent," he said, voice unwavering, "Mrs. Thompson legally changed her will 3 months ago." David blinked. "What?" The words hung in the air like thunderclouds. "The new will removes you as a beneficiary," Morrison said. "Entirely." He froze, stared at me. "What?" I looked at him then. Steady, calm. "It's true," I said softly. Morrison went on. "The primary beneficiary is the Jackson County Animal Shelter, in honor of Whiskers. The secondary is the Adult Literacy Foundation." David's mouth opened, but no words came. He staggered back a step. His face went pale. My business. He sat down suddenly, like his legs forgot they belonged to him. "All the money," he whispered. "You said, I thought." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because we both knew what he thought. He thought I would die quietly and leave him rich. He thought he'd already won. But Morrison wasn't finished. "I should also inform you," he said, now fully turning toward David, "that criminal complaints have been filed. The district attorney's office has begun reviewing the evidence. Charges may include forgery, financial elder abuse, and real estate fraud." David's head snapped up. "Wait, what?" "You should expect formal communication within the next 10 days, Morrison said. "And a separate civil suit is being filed," Eleanor added, stepping into the room like she had waited her entire life for this entrance, "to recover the proceeds from the sale of the Sycamore Street property. A lien will be placed on your assets, including the new home and any business holdings." "You can't do this." David's voice was different now, thinner, like a boy lost in a grown man's mess. I stood slowly. "You taught me something, David," I said. "You taught me that too, you. Family only matters when there's money involved." He looked up at me, red-faced, eyes glossy. "I made a mistake. Mom, please. I can fix this." I shook my head. "I gave my life to people who only called when they needed something. So I decided to give what's left of me to people who actually need it." I stepped closer, to the animals you abandoned, to the adults learning to read, to the people who won't use me as a stepping stone. He reached for my hand. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You meant to help yourself," I said. "Now I'm helping others. From you." Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard his breath hitch, the scrape of a chair, the weight of failure landing all at once. As I passed the receptionist's desk, I heard it. Thud. The sound of him collapsing into a chair. Gasping. Finally understanding he had built his entire future on sand. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free. But the story wasn't over yet. 6 months later, the dust has settled. And the truth sits where it always belonged. In the light. David pled guilty to elder financial abuse. He took a plea deal. 18 months probation, mandatory restitution, and community service. His business is gone. His reputation? Unrecoverable. He rents a small 1-bedroom apartment now and works for the very man he once called incompetent. His children don't answer his calls anymore. I imagine their silence stings worse than any court order ever could. As for me, I used part of the recovered money to buy a modest house near the animal shelter. A quiet little place with morning sun that lands perfectly on the front porch. Whiskers naps there most afternoons. Safe and spoiled. I volunteer at the shelter now, every day. I help walk dogs, feed kittens, fold laundry, clean cages. It's not glamorous, but it's grounding. These animals, they don't care about what I lost. They care that I show up twice a week. I teach adult literacy at the local community center. We sit in a circle with battered books and big hearts. There's something sacred in watching a grown woman read her first sentence aloud. Something healing. Sarah and Michael visit more often now. When they found out what David had done, They were devastated. But they didn't just apologize. They showed up. We talk more, laugh more. We're rebuilding. Gently, honestly. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling small. That sterile room in the assisted living facility once felt like the end of my life. Now I understand. It was the beginning of a different kind of freedom, a simpler life, a real one. I'm no longer defined by what I own or how much I can give. I'm defined by the peace I feel when I close my eyes at night, knowing no one is counting on my silence to stay rich. Mrs. Chen visits every Thursday. We drink strong tea and play Scrabble. She always wins. But I suspect she cheats on the cue tiles. Eleanor and I started a support group, quietly at first. Just a handful of women in a church basement. But it's grown. We've had dozens come through now, women and some men, who thought they were alone, ashamed, broken. But they weren't. The animal shelter named its education wing after me. Maggie's room. That's where the kids come after school to read to the dogs. One of my former students sent me a letter after hearing what happened. "You taught me how to read," it said. "And now you're teaching the world how to listen." I still grieve the son I thought I had. That grief doesn't go away. It just gets quieter. I accept now that David chose money over family. That some people only know how to love when it profits them. I don't hate him. But I won't protect him either. He sends letters sometimes. Handwritten apologies, promises he's changed. I read them, but I never write back. Because I've moved beyond anger, I've arrived at peace. Have you ever lived in someone else's silence so long? You forgot what your own voice sounded like? That was me. For years. But now, I speak. I speak to community centers, to church groups, to retirement homes. I speak to anyone who will listen about financial abuse, about trust, about what it means to lose everything, and come out stronger. Law enforcement has started using my case as part of their training curriculum. Officers shake my hand after presentations. They say, "We didn't know it looked like this." And I say, "It always looks like love." That's what makes it so dangerous. I thought losing my house was the end of my story, but it was actually the beginning of my real life. The house was just walls, just memories in drywall. Home is where people value you for who you are, not what you can give. The real victory wasn't the money I recovered. It was remembering my own worth. It was building something real, something soft and unshakable, with people who show up. Not because they expect something, but because they care. So if someone in your life makes you feel small, listen to that feeling. Your worth isn't measured by how others treat you. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us how strong we really are. And sometimes the quietest revenge is living so well, they never get to steal your peace again. Cảm ơn bạn đã làm rõ. Dưới đây là phiên bản đã được chỉnh sửa theo đúng yêu cầu, không tiết lộ tên nhân vật hay chi tiết cụ thể của video tiếp theo. Mà chị gọi mở đây hấp dẫn. If my story resonates with you, please share it. Someone you love might need to hear that they're not alone. And if you've ever been betrayed by family, know this, you are stronger than you think. Tomorrow I'll be sharing another story. One that begins with quiet suspicion and ends with a twist no one saw coming. A story about betrayal, about clarity, about power reclaimed in the most unexpected way. Trust me, you won't want to miss how it all unfolds. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're never too old to start over, and you're never too trusting to learn how to protect yourself. I'll see you tomorrow.